So, you're the I think the frustration that you feel about having your position maybe not being subsumed by other positions that want you kind of in your camp. I oftentimes feel that frustration as well because I consider myself to be a creationist. But so oftentimes when people hear that term, they immediately think of young Earth creationism, right? And they don't
I'm
appreciate.
guilty of that, by the way. I'll tell you right now, I am guilty of that. I hear creationist, and I know that you're creationist. I know what type of creationist you are, but when I hear creationism, I'm so used to being around younger creationists that's what I mentally go to that place, right? And I
Yeah,
don't ever want to lump you in with the same group of younger creationists because they are science deniers, which I know for a fact you are not.
yeah. Well, but even then, when you say, okay, well, I'm an old Earth creationist, there's again a range of perspectives that fall under that umbrella. A lot of it has to do with how one understands the creation accounts in Genesis 1, and how do those creation accounts relate to the scientific record. And then what's interesting to me is you also have people that are theistic evolutionists, which you could, and what I find fascinating is that the organization BioLogos, founded by Francis Collins, today headed up by Dev Arzma, an organization that at reasons to believe we actually are friendly with, though we have quite substantial disagreement with them on a number of issues. They actually prefer the term evolutionary creationist as opposed to theistic evolutionist because they want to place the emphasis on creation, that God on the creationist aspect, not on the evolution aspect. And so, so within the creationist umbrella, you have old Earth and evolutionary creationists that really have very differing views from one another, and of course, very differing views from young Earth creationists, and also, have again, very differing perspectives on how they see Christianity relating to the scientific record, to the data that's coming from science, or at least the ideas that are coming from science. And then even, of course, within the theistic evolution umbrella, there's a wide range of perspectives. In fact, one of the points we made when we've been engaging BioLogos is you guys have such a broad range of perspectives, we have no idea actually how to even engage it. Because every time we engage an idea, 3/4 of the people in your organization will say, well, we don't hold to that idea, right? So it's almost maddening, but I think that goes to the point that we're trying to make, and that is, it really is worth the effort of asking people, a series of questions to really understand their perspective, and then engage, people on their own terms. I think that's the most intellectually honest way to do things, and not to try to force people into a convenient box, so that because that if they're in that box, there are these pet arguments that you can bring forward that's just going to knock down their case, but rather actually try to engage them on their own terms.
Well, that's why you ask them what their positions are. This is why I don't like making assumptions about certain people's positions, right? But this is why when you hear somebody say, "Look, I'm not a Christian," you shouldn't assume that they're necessarily an atheist, right? People make those assumptions. When I hear creationist, and I'm guilty of this, I fully admit that when I hear creationist, I do tend to young creationist. But as you pointed out, even among the theistic evolutionist or the evolutionary creationist, there's a huge difference between certain beliefs. So I've talked to theistic creationists who think that God's put everything out there and this kind of let it go in motion, knowing where it was going to end up, but really didn't have much of a hand along the way. There's other creationists, and I think that you might actually kind of fall into this particular one, that God makes little changes, little infinite number of little changes along the way to get where he wants to go. I think that's more your position, if I remember
Yeah, well,
correctly.
and I take the view that God is intervening throughout Earth's history to bring about his creative purposes. And so I would say, in a broad sense, I'm skeptical of facets of the evolutionary framework, but I don't completely reject the reality of evolution. It's just that I'm not convinced that the mechanisms that we have available to us today can actually explain what I would call a biological innovation, or the creation of biological novelty. So these are places where I believe you have to have a divine input. But precisely what do I mean by divine input, I'm still wrestling with that, quite honestly. So so somebody asked me, well, how is God intervening in nature? My response is, I don't know. And so there's actually some versions of theistic evolution where they do see God intimately involved in every moment of the process. Well, that's an intervention where God and so that would be a view that would butt up against mine, where they just are seeing God creating through a process, but a process where he's, entirely in control. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have theistic evolutionists that would say, well, God, it's a clockwork universe. God's just winding it up and letting it rip, and whatever's going to come is going to come.